Hassan is in Slough. Hello, Hassan.
Oh, good evening. Hi. I'll try
Hi.
not to ask a question about Brexit, but I stood as a Tory candidate in 2005, and
Me too.
I voted for Remain, actually.
I didn't.
But I respect the outcome of the election, of the referendum, and as Theresa May said on the doorstep of number 10, Brexit means Brexit. But I suppose this question is more for John Redwood. I've been a member of the Conservatives since 1995. I've observed all the fractures within our party under John Major's government, which cost us our election. And I'm fairly dismayed to see this apparent disunity within the parliamentary party. And I want to see more loyalty or more unity and backing for Theresa May. So how do we ensure this actually happens? Because I think that if we do back her 100%, she'll have two things will happen. Number one, she'll have the upper hand in the negotiating power with Europe. And number two, if we back her, the country will back her.
John Redwood.
Well, I don't agree, Hassan, with your historical analysis. I think what happened under John Major was that he, as a senior member of the government and then as Prime Minister, had forced us into the European exchange rate mechanism, which did huge damage to our economy. It plunged us into a very nasty recession. A lot of people lost their jobs. It was a disastrous thing to do. I was one of the few people who tried to stop him and disagreed with him. And then, of course, we lost a huge amount of support in the public because they said, you're no longer economically competent. You Conservatives have made a big mistake. The fact that Labour and the CBI had recommended it didn't matter. It was the Conservative government that did it. And we never recovered from the economic damage that the RM did. Yes, we had some rows thereafter, but if you look at the polling, it didn't actually make any difference. We had lost the election by the depth of the recession and the mistaken economic policy. So I think it's totally different today. The economy is fine. It's still growing, lots of jobs, all that kind of thing. There isn't that kind of issue. And that's why we're still reasonably high in the polls. Governments often lose a bit of traction mid-term, but there's no sign of that happening at the moment. And when a Prime Minister is making a very clear mistake, as I'm afraid this one is, over the handling of these negotiations, it is incumbent on people who wish her well and want the country to succeed to set out an alternative, to be critical. And that's what I and my colleagues are doing. We think that is helpful. We think Theresa has to come off her Chequers proposals. I think she'll learn that again tonight in Salzburg, and the sooner she does and the sooner she picks up the ideas we've offered her for getting our country out in a more timely and more orderly way, the better it's going to be. It's a myth that divided parties can't rule. In all my lifetime, the ruling party has always been divided. I mean, the massive rows between Blair and Brown throughout the Labour... Well, they did. Blair and Brown were at loggerheads throughout their years and had a couple of election victories together despite it. Thatcher was constantly being attacked by a group of people in the Tory party who fundamentally disagreed with her, but she won 3 elections despite it. What loses you elections is when you really mess up the economy. And the Conservatives did that with the exchange rate mechanism, and Labour did it with the banking crash, and those are the decisive events.
Simon Heffer, from a historian's perspective, I mean, the Tory party has never actually been totally united on anything, has it?
No, it's always been a coalition. And Hassan, when he was speaking, reminded me very much of the late Rear Admiral Morgan Giles, that legendary Tory MP who got up during the Heath years at a very difficult time for a then divided Conservative Party and said simply pro bono publico no bloody panico. And I don't know...
This is the reason I invited you on.
I don't know who the Morgan Giles is to know sure. I mean, Hassan, I think, is very optimistic when he says that if the party would get behind Theresa May, all would be well. It wouldn't, because she's shown categorically, I'm afraid, in the 2 years that she's been Prime Minister, that she doesn't know how to lead. She's got appalling judgment, the election last year, QV, and her negotiating position has been appalling. She's been on her knees all the way through these negotiations.